A lonely black teen shared his last Christmas meal with a stray dog. The next morning, when a man in an expensive suit knocked on his door, his hands started trembling when he realized who had been watching. Joshua's breath fogged the cold window as he watched the Martinez family next door gather around their Christmas tree. Their laughter leaked through the thin walls of his apartment, making the silence in his own living room feel heavier. He wiped the condensation with his sleeve, leaving a clear streak on the frosted glass. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 6:43 p.m. His mom wouldn't be home until morning, another double shift at Boston General. He tried calling her cell 3 times already, but kept getting her voicemail. "This is Sarah Williams. I'm probably with a patient right now. Leave a message." "Hey, Mom," he'd said the last time. "Just checking in. The heater's acting up again, but I put on that extra sweater you got me. Don't worry, okay? Love you." He'd kept his voice steady, not mentioning how the temperature had dropped below freezing outside. Joshua walked to the ancient radiator and jiggled the valve again. It clanked and sputtered, then fell silent. A blast of cold air whistled through the gap under the front door, making him shiver. He grabbed the old towel they kept by the entrance and stuffed it against the crack. The kitchen wasn't much warmer. Joshua opened the nearly empty fridge. Half a rotisserie chicken from the discount bin, some instant mashed potatoes, and a can of cranberry sauce his mom had splurged on to make it feel more like Christmas. She'd left a note taped to the chicken container. "Heat for 2 minutes. Don't forget your vegetables. Love, Mom." He followed her instructions, watching the microwave plate spin. When it beeped, he arranged the food carefully on their least chipped plate, trying to make it look special. The chicken was slightly dry, but he'd gotten good at fixing that, a trick he'd learned from countless solo dinners. A little warm water mixed into the meat made it almost as good as fresh. The Martinez's Christmas music drifted through the walls again. Joshua's throat tightened as he remembered last Christmas, when his dad was still around. They'd had a real tree then, with presents underneath. Now there was just the small plastic one his mom had found at Goodwill, set up on the wobbly coffee table. "It's temporary, baby," his mom had said last week when she caught him staring at their neighbor's decorations. "Next year will be better. I promise." He believed her. She never made promises she couldn't keep. But watching her leave for another 16-hour shift this morning, dark circles under her eyes, made his chest hurt. She hadn't even had time to eat the toast he'd made her. Joshua lit the emergency candle they kept for power outages. They were trying to save on electricity, and set it in the middle of the coffee table. The flame cast weak shadows on the walls, where water stains made dark patterns on the peeling wallpaper. He sat cross-legged on the floor, pushing aside the college nursing textbooks his mom studied in her rare free time. His phone buzzed. For a second, his heart leaped, thinking it was his mom. But it was just a weather alert. Winter storm warning in effect until tomorrow afternoon. He clicked it off, trying not to think about her driving home in the snow. The silence pressed in around him. Even the Martinez family had gone quiet. Joshua picked at his potatoes, forcing himself to eat slowly. He had to make the food last. Tomorrow was Christmas, and everything would be closed. He was pushing the cranberry sauce around his plate when he heard it, a soft scratching sound at the window. At first, he thought it was just ice or tree branches. But there it was again, more distinct this time. Joshua froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. The scratching continued, accompanied by a quiet whimper. Slowly, he turned toward the window. Through the frost-covered glass, he could make out a dark shape moving against the white snow. The security light from the parking lot flickered on, illuminating a pair of scared eyes staring back at him. It was a dog, a skinny, shivering dog, its ribs visible even through its matted fur. As Joshua watched, it raised a paw and scratched at the glass again, leaving faint marks in the frost. The dog whimpered once more, and Joshua felt something in his chest crack. He looked down at his plate, still half full with the chicken his mom had worked extra shifts to buy. Then he looked back at those hungry eyes. The Martinez's Christmas lights reflected off the window, creating a kaleidoscope of colors around the dog's desperate face. In the distance, church bells started ringing, announcing the beginning of Christmas Eve services. Joshua sat very still, his dinner growing cold, as he faced the first real decision of the night. The dog scratched again, weaker this time. Outside, The wind howled through the empty parking lot, carrying the promise of more snow. Joshua's hand tightened around his fork as he remembered his mom's warning about not opening the door for anyone while she was gone. But this wasn't anyone, was it? This was just a hungry dog alone on Christmas Eve. Just like him. The scratching stopped. When Joshua looked up again, the dog had pressed its nose against the glass, fogging it with desperate breaths. In the harsh glare of the security light, he could see patches of ice crystals forming in its fur. His mom always said that character showed in the choices you made when nobody was watching. Joshua looked around his empty apartment, at the single candle flickering in the darkness, at the picture of his mom in her nurse's uniform smiling tiredly from the shelf. The dog whimpered one last time, a sound so full of hopelessness that it made Joshua's decision for him. He stood up, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor, and walked toward the window. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest choices. As Joshua reached for the window latch, he didn't know he was about to set in motion a chain of events that would transform not just one night, but the entire course of his future. The metal was cold under his fingers as he turned the handle. The window groaned as Joshua pulled it open. A blast of freezing air rushed in, making the candle flame dance wildly. The dog stumbled back, startled by the sudden movement. "Hey," Joshua whispered, his breath visible in the cold air. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The dog looked up at him, trembling. Now that the window was open, Joshua could see it clearly, a medium-sized mutt with black and brown fur, one ear standing up while the other flopped over. A nasty cut ran along its left front leg, crusted with ice and dirt. Joshua glanced at his plate on the coffee table, then back at the dog. "Wait here," he said, as if the animal could understand. He grabbed his plate and returned to the window. The smell of chicken made the dog's nose twitch. "You hungry?" Joshua tore off a small piece of chicken and held it out. The dog took a hesitant step forward, then quickly retreated, its tail tucked between its legs. "Come on," Joshua coaxed. "It's good. Look." He put the piece on the windowsill and stepped back. The dog watched him for a long moment, hunger fighting fear in its eyes. Finally, it crept forward and snatched the chicken, swallowing it in one gulp. Joshua couldn't help but smile. "See? Not so bad, right?" He tore off another piece, bigger this time. The dog took this one more quickly, then looked up expectantly. Its tail gave a tentative wag. Joshua was about to offer more when he noticed the dog's injured leg trembling under its weight. Each time it put pressure on the paw, it winced. "You're hurt," he said, leaning closer to examine the wound. The dog shied away, letting out a small whimper. No, it's okay. I just want to help." A gust of wind whipped through the parking lot, carrying ice crystals that stung Joshua's face. The dog hunched against the cold, its whole body shaking now. Joshua looked over his shoulder at the empty apartment. His mom's voice echoed in his head, "No pets allowed." The landlord's strict about that, but the temperature was dropping fast, and the storm was getting worse. "Okay," he muttered, making up his mind. "Okay, come here, buddy." Inside, the dog didn't move. "Please." Joshua held out another piece of chicken, this time keeping his hand just inside the window. "You can't stay out there. You'll freeze." The dog took one step forward, then stopped. Its good ear twitched at every sound. A car door slamming somewhere in the complex, the distant bark of another dog, the howling wind. "I'm alone too," Joshua said softly. "It's just me here. Well, and this chicken, which I'm willing to share." Maybe it was his tone, or maybe it was just the promise of more food, but something in his words seemed to reach the dog. It limped forward, carefully maneuvering through the window into the warm apartment. Joshua quickly closed the window behind it, shutting out the cold. The dog stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, dripping melted snow onto the carpet. Its eyes darted around the room, looking for escape routes. The bathroom, Joshua decided. We need to clean that cut. He headed toward the hallway, but the dog didn't follow. Instead, it backed into a corner, ears flat against its head. Right? Trust. That takes time. Joshua returned to the coffee table and picked up his plate. Let's start with dinner instead. He sat on the floor, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The dog watched as he tore the chicken into small pieces, making a separate pile on the edge of his plate. "Come on," he said, sliding the plate across the floor. "It's Christmas Eve. Nobody should eat alone tonight." The dog's nose twitched again. Slowly, carefully it crept forward. Joshua held perfectly still as it approached the plate. When it finally started eating, he let out the breath he'd been holding. As the dog ate, Joshua studied it more closely. Despite the matted fur and injuries, he could tell it was young, probably not much more than a year old. Like him, he thought. The dog finished the chicken and looked up, licking its lips. Some of the fear had left its eyes, replaced by cautious hope. "Okay," Joshua said. "Now about that leg." He stood up slowly, trying not to startle his new guest. "I'll be right back. Don't worry." In the bathroom, Joshua found the first aid kit his mom always kept stocked, one of the perks of having a nurse for a mother. He grabbed some gauze, antibiotic ointment, and a clean washcloth. When he returned, the dog had moved closer to the candle, drawn by its warmth. It tensed when it saw the supplies in Joshua's hands. "It's okay," he soothed, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "This might sting a little, but it'll help. I promise." He wet the washcloth with warm water and held it out, letting the dog sniff it. "See? Nothing scary." The dog's good ear flicked forward with interest. Joshua took this as a good sign and slowly reached for its injured leg. The dog pulled back slightly, but didn't run. "Good boy," Joshua murmured, though he wasn't actually sure if it was a boy or girl. Or girl. "Sorry, I shouldn't assume." As he gently cleaned the wound, he kept talking, his voice soft and steady. He told the dog about his mom, about her long hours at the hospital, about how proud he was of her for helping people. He mentioned his dad too, briefly, but that hurt too much, so he switched to describing his favorite TV shows instead. The dog gradually relaxed under his touch, even leaning slightly against his leg. The cut wasn't as deep as it had looked, but it was dirty and needed attention. "Almost done," Joshua assured as he applied the antibiotic ointment. The dog barely flinched. He was just finishing with the gauze when a flash of movement caught his eye. Through the window, he saw a dark car cruise slowly through the parking lot, its headlights off. The dog noticed it too, growling softly. Joshua's heart rate picked up. He remembered the stories his mom told about their neighborhood, about why he needed to keep the doors locked at night. The car passed by their window, moving deliberately slow. In the dim light, Joshua couldn't make out the driver, but he had the distinct feeling they were being watched. "It's okay," he whispered, though his hands had started to shake. "They'll go away." The car completed its circuit of the parking lot and disappeared around the corner. Joshua let out a shaky breath, but the knot in his stomach didn't ease. Something about that car felt wrong. He looked down at the dog, who had pressed closer to his side. "I guess we both need somewhere safe tonight, huh?" The dog responded by laying its head on his knee. Joshua glanced at the window again, but the car hadn't returned. Still, he got up and double-checked the locks on both the door and windows. His mom's words echoed in his head, "Better safe than sorry." Back in the living room, he gathered some old blankets from the closet and made a bed in the corner furthest from the window. The dog watched with interest as he arranged them into a nest. "Here," he patted the blankets. "Much better than the snow, right?" To his surprise, the dog walked right over and curled up in the makeshift bed. It looked up at him with those soulful eyes, and this time its tail wagged properly. Joshua smiled, feeling warmth spread through his chest despite the cold apartment. "Merry Christmas," he said softly. He was about to get ready for bed himself when his phone buzzed again. His heart jumped. Maybe his mom was finally on break. But when he looked at the screen, it was just another weather alert. Heavy snow expected overnight. Travel not advised. Joshua looked at the dog, now dozing on the blankets, then back at his phone. Should he text his mom about their new guest? She wouldn't be able to check her messages until her break anyway, and he didn't want her worrying during her shift. Tomorrow, he decided. He'd tell her tomorrow. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and somewhere in the distance, that dark car's engine rumbled in the night. But inside the apartment, for the first time in a long while, Joshua didn't feel quite so alone. Joshua couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch, wrapped in his mom's old quilt, listening to the dog's soft breathing from the corner. Every car that passed made him tense up, but none had the same quiet engine as the mysterious vehicle from earlier. The digital clock read 11:42 p.m. His mom will be halfway through her night shift now, probably helping the on-call doctor with rounds. He picked up his phone again, thumb hovering over her number. The dog shifted in its sleep, whimpering slightly. Joshua put the phone down and walked over to check on it. The gauze on its leg was holding steady, though he'd need to change it in the morning. "You need a name," he whispered, careful not to wake it. The dog's good ear twitched at his voice. "I can't just keep calling you dog." He sat cross-legged beside the blanket nest, watching the steady rise and fall of the dog's chest. Its fur was starting to dry, revealing more of the brown coloring mixed with the black. In the candlelight, the pattern reminded him of the marble notebook his dad had given him for his 12th birthday, just 2 months before he left. "How about Marble?" Joshua suggested softly. The dog opened one eye, gave its tail a single wag, then went back to sleep. "Marble it is then." A blast of wind rattled the windows. Joshua pulled his knees to his chest, trying to stay warm. The heater had given up completely an hour ago, and the temperature in the apartment was dropping steadily. He thought about the emergency space heater in his mom's closet. She told him never to use it while she was gone. It was old, and the wiring was questionable. But as another shiver ran through him, he made a decision. "Stay here," he told Marble, though the dog showed no signs of moving. The space heater was buried under a pile of summer clothes. Joshua dragged it out, along with the heavy extension cord. His hands shook slightly as he plugged it in, remembering his mom's warnings about electrical fires. "Just for a little while," he promised the empty room. "Until it warms up." The heater hummed to life, its coils gradually turning orange. Joshua positioned it carefully away from anything flammable, just like his mom had taught him. Warm air began to fill the small living room. Marble lifted its head, nose twitching at the change in temperature. After a moment, it stood up, favoring its good leg, and limped over to sit beside Joshua. "Better, right?" He reached out slowly and, when the dog didn't pull away, scratched behind its ears. Marble leaned into his touch, and something tight in Joshua's chest loosened a little. They sat like that for a while, sharing the warmth. Outside, the storm grew stronger. Snow pelted the windows, and the wind found new gaps to whistle through. But inside, in the circle of heat and candlelight, Joshua felt almost peaceful. A car door slammed somewhere in the complex. Marble's head snapped up, a low growl rumbling in its throat. Joshua held his breath, listening. Footsteps crunched in the snow, getting closer. "Please walk past," he thought. "Please just walk past." The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind. Then they started again, moving away. Joshua exhaled slowly. Marble was still tense, staring at the door. "It's okay," Joshua whispered. "They're gone?" But the dog wouldn't relax. It stood up, limping to the window, and peered through the frost-covered glass. Joshua followed, his heart beating faster. The dark car was back, parked at the far end of the lot. Its headlights were off, but Joshua could see the faint glow of a cigarette inside. "They're watching us," he realized. His voice sounded small in the quiet room. Marble pressed against his leg, still growling softly. Joshua's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. What if they were casing the apartment? What if they'd seen him let Marble in and were going to report him to the landlord? What if they were waiting for him to fall asleep? He needed a plan. The emergency exit was through his bedroom window, leading to the fire escape. If someone tried to break in, he and Marble could climb down to Mrs. Chin's apartment below. She was always home, and she had a baseball bat by her door. He'd seen it when she brought up cookies last week. Joshua gathered his mom's nursing textbooks and stacked them by the front door. If someone tried to force it open, the books would fall, making enough noise to wake him. Then he checked all the windows again, making sure they were locked. "Come on," he told Marble. "We'll sleep in my room tonight. It's safer." The dog followed him down the short hallway. Joshua's room was small, barely fitting his twin bed and dresser, but it had a clear view of both the parking lot and the fire escape. He made another blanket nest for Marble beside his bed, then changed into warm pajamas. The space heater wouldn't reach back here, but at least the walls block some of the wind. If anything happens, he told Marble, we run. Okay. The dog looked at him with those intelligent eyes and settled into its new bed. Joshua climbed under his own covers, positioning himself so he could see out the window. The dark car was still there. He must have dozed off eventually, because suddenly he was startled awake by Marble's movement. The dog had gotten up and was staring intently at the bedroom door. Joshua checked his phone. 3:17 a.m. What is it? He whispered. Marble's tail wagged once, and its posture relaxed. A key turned in the front door lock. Mom? Joshua called softly. Just me, baby, his mom's tired voice answered. The roads got too bad, so they sent us home early. Why are you still up? Joshua looked at Marble, who looked back at him. This was at the moment of truth. But before he could answer, his mom appeared in the doorway. Joshua, why are there books by the... She stopped, staring at the dog. Oh, I can explain, Joshua said quickly, sitting up. He was hurt and it was snowing, and... His mom held up a hand, silencing him. She looked exhausted in her scrubs, dark circles under her eyes. Snow was melting in her hair. Is that a space heater I hear in the living room? Joshua's stomach dropped. I'm sorry. I know you said not to, but it was so cold and... She sighed, rubbing her face. Turn it off. Now. But Mom... Now, Joshua. He got up, avoiding her eyes as he passed her. In the living room, he unplugged the space heater. When he turned around, his mom was kneeling beside Marble, examining its bandaged leg with professional interest. You did this? She asked, gesturing to the gauze. Joshua nodded. I used a first aid kit. I cleaned it first, like you taught me. She was quiet for a moment, still studying the bandage. Good technique, she said finally. But you know we can't keep him. Her, Joshua corrected automatically. He'd figured it out earlier when checking the bandage. And I know, but can she at least stay tonight? Please? There's a weird car outside, and... What weird car? Joshua led her to the window. The dark vehicle was gone, but the tire tracks in the fresh snow proved it had been real. His mom's expression changed. How long was it there? On and off since I let Marble in. That's what I named her, he added quickly. They kept driving by, watching the apartment. She was quiet again, that focused look she got when making important decisions at work. Finally, she turned to him. New rules, she said. First, no more space heater ever. I mean it, Joshua. Second, that dog needs to see a real vet as soon as the road's clear. Third, she paused, looking at Marble, who had limped out to join them. Third, we'll discuss permanent arrangements after Christmas. Deal? Joshua's heart leaped. Really? Really? But... She held up a finger. If the landlord asks, she's just visiting. Understood? He threw his arms around her waist, hugging her tight. Thank you, he mumbled into her scrubs. They smelled like hospital disinfectant and snow. She hugged him back, then yawned. Bed now, both of you. It's technically Christmas morning, and I need at least a few hours of sleep. Joshua started toward his room, Marble limping beside him. At the hallway, he paused. Mom? I saw the car's license plate. Should I tell someone? She was instantly alert. You did? What was it? BL 548X. It was a black sedan, expensive looking, like the ones in your medical drama shows. His mom's face went carefully blank. Her professional look, he called it. I'll make some calls tomorrow. Don't worry about it tonight. But he could tell by her voice that she was worried. She double-checked all the locks before going to her room. Joshua lay in bed, listening to the storm outside. Marble had settled back into her blanket nest, but she stayed alert, good ear twitching at every sound. Merry Christmas, Marble, he whispered. The dog's tail thumped against the floor twice. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring, announcing Christmas morning. Joshua closed his eyes, trying to sleep. He was almost drifting off when he heard it. The distinct sound of that engine again, followed by the crunch of tires on fresh snow. Marble raised her head but didn't growl this time. Then, clear and sharp through the storm, came a sound that made Joshua's blood run cold. 3 firm knocks on the front door. The knocks echoed through the quiet apartment. Joshua sat frozen in his bed, heart pounding against his ribs. Marble stood up, her injured leg trembling as she positioned herself between him and the bedroom door. Joshua. His mom's whispered voice came from the hallway. Stay in your room. He heard her soft footsteps moving toward the front door. The digital clock on his nightstand showed 6:15 a.m., too early for normal visitors, especially on Christmas morning. The knocks came again, more insistent this time. Who is it? His mom called, her nurse voice on, calm, professional, hiding any fear. Mr. Peterson, a man's voice answered. It was deep but gentle, like a radio announcer. I apologize for the early hour, but I need to speak with you about your son. Joshua's stomach clenched. How did the man know about him? My son is asleep, his mom said firmly. Whatever this is, it can wait until normal business hours. Mrs. Williams, the man said, I saw what Joshua did last night. The kindness he showed. Please, 5 minutes of your time is all I ask. Marble's growl was so quiet Joshua felt it more than heard it. He slid out of bed and crept to his bedroom door, the dog limping behind him. Mom, he called softly. She appeared in the hallway, still in her scrubs. I told you to stay in your room. Is it the man from the car? Her eyes narrowed. What did he look like? I didn't see him clearly, just the car. Black sedan, tinted windows. She nodded once, then straightened her shoulders. Stay here. If I say night shift, you take Marble and go down the fire escape to Mrs. Chan's. Understand? But Mom dash understand? Yes. She walked to the front door, checking the peephole first. Joshua heard her small intake of breath. Your business card, she demanded through the door. Slide it under. A moment later, a thick white card appeared beneath the door. His mom picked it up, studying it under the hall light. Whatever she saw made her shoulders relax slightly. You're from Mason Memorial? Chief of Surgery, the man confirmed. Your supervisor, Dr. Martinez, speaks very highly of you. Joshua watched his mom's face change, surprise, suspicion, then careful consideration. 5 minutes, she said finally. In the hallway, where my neighbors can see. She unlocked the door, keeping the chain on, and opened it just enough to see out. Joshua couldn't see the man from his position, but he heard the rustle of expensive fabric. Mrs. Williams, the man said warmly. Thank you for your time, but I think this conversation would be better had inside, where it's warmer. I promise you'll want to hear what I have to say. His mom was quiet for a moment. Then she closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it fully. The man who stepped into their apartment looked nothing like the shadowy figure Joshua had imagined. He was tall and lean, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than their rent. His dark skin was weathered but well cared for, and his close-cropped gray hair gave him a distinguished air. He moved with the confident grace of someone used to operating rooms and board meetings. Joshua, he said, spotting him in the hallway. I'm very pleased to meet you. His eyes moved to Marble, who had pressed herself against Joshua's leg. And this must be your new friend. Joshua felt his mom's hand on his shoulder. How do you know my son's name? Mr. Peterson smiled, reaching into his suit jacket. He pulled out a phone and held it up, showing a photo on the screen. Joshua's breath caught. It was him and Marble from last night, sitting by the window sharing dinner. I apologize for the surveillance, Mr. Peterson said. But when I saw this young man share his Christmas dinner with a stray dog, knowing full well it might get him in trouble with his landlord, I knew I had to meet him. He pocketed the phone. You've raised an extraordinary son, Mrs. Williams. You were watching us? Joshua found his voice. In that car? My driver was yes. I was in surgery until midnight. But he sent me the photos, and I knew I couldn't wait to speak with you. He glanced around their apartment, taking in the peeling wallpaper and the cold radiator. Perhaps we could sit down? His mom hesitated, then gestured to their worn couch. 5 minutes, she reminded him. Mr. Peterson sat, adjusting his suit pants with practiced ease. Joshua's mom took the armchair, pulling Joshua to sit on the arm beside her. Marble stayed close, her good ear forward, analyzing the visitor. I'll be direct, Mr. Peterson said. Mrs. Williams, I've reviewed your work at Boston General. Your dedication to your patients, your attention to detail, your willingness to take extra shifts. It's exactly what we look for at Mason Memorial. Joshua felt his mom stiffen. Mason Memorial was the fancy private hospital across town, the one with the state-of-the-art equipment and celebrity patients. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a career, Mr. Peterson corrected. Full benefits, regular hours, and a salary that would allow you to live closer to the hospital. In a building that allows pets, he added, glancing at Marble. Joshua's heart started beating faster. Regular hours? No more night shifts? Why? His mom asked, her voice suspicious. Why now? Why like this? Mr. Peterson leaned forward, his expression serious. Because character reveals itself in moments of choice. Mrs. Williams, your son, faced with a hungry creature on a cold night, chose kindness over comfort. He used proper medical techniques to treat an injury. He showed responsibility beyond his years. He smiled at Joshua. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as they say. So, you stalked my son to offer me a job? Her voice had an edge now. I observed a moment of pure compassion that reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place. Mr. Peterson reached into his jacket again and pulled out an envelope. Everything you need to know is in here. Take time to review it. Discuss it as a family. He stood up, straightening his suit. And don't worry about the dog's veterinary care. Mason Memorial has an excellent clinic for staff pets. He walked to the door, then turned back. One more thing. He pulled something else from his pocket. A small wrapped package. Merry Christmas, Joshua. For you and your friend. Joshua took the package carefully. Through the paper, he could feel something soft. I'll need your answer by New Year's, Mr. Peterson told his mom. But something tells me you've been waiting for an opportunity like this. He opened the door, letting in a blast of cold air. Oh, and Joshua? That bandaging technique was excellent. We could use volunteers in our youth medical program if you're interested. Then he was gone, leaving only his business card and the envelope as proof he'd been real. Joshua's mom picked up the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a contract, several glossy brochures, and what looked like apartment listings. Mom? Joshua whispered. Are you okay? She blinked rapidly, and he realized she was trying not to cry. Open your present, she said instead of answering. Joshua unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a brand new red collar, with a matching leash and a gift certificate to the Mason Memorial Veterinary Clinic. Marble sniffed the collar curiously, then looked up at Joshua, her tail wagging slowly. Can we trust him? Joshua asked his mom. She was reading the contract, her nurse face on, but he could see hope fighting with suspicion in her eyes. I know Dr. Martinez, she said finally. If he vouches for Mr. Peterson. She trailed off, staring at something in the contract. Oh my God! What? What is it? She showed him a number on the page. Joshua wasn't great with money, but he knew enough to count zeros. His eyes widened. That's a lot. That's a new apartment, she said softly. That's no more night shifts. She looked at Marble. That's a real Christmas miracle. Joshua slid off the chair arm and knelt beside Marble, holding up the collar. What do you think, girl? Want to be official? Marble pressed her cold nose against his hand, then licked his fingers. He took that as a yes. We still need to think about this, his mom said, but her voice was lighter than he'd heard it in months. Check references, review the contract, visit the hospital. But? Joshua prompted, hearing the smile in her voice. But, she agreed, I think Mr. Peterson was right about one thing. She joined him on the floor, scratching Marble behind the ears. Sometimes character reveals itself in moments of choice. And you, my sweet boy, made the right one. Outside, the storm had stopped. Morning sunlight glinted off the fresh snow, making it sparkle like tiny diamonds. The dark car was gone, leaving only pristine tire tracks as evidence of the night's events. Joshua fastened the collar around Marble's neck, adjusting it carefully over her bandage. Merry Christmas, Mom. She pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. Merry Christmas, baby. Now who wants breakfast? I think we have just enough eggs for 3. As if she understood. Marble's tail thumped against the floor, spreading joy through their small apartment one wag at a time. Joshua sat on the kitchen floor with Marble, sharing pieces of scrambled egg while his mom made call after call. The breakfast dishes sat unwashed in the sink. Unusual for their household, but this wasn't a usual Christmas morning. Yes, I understand it's Christmas, his mom said into her phone, pacing the small kitchen. But if I could just speak with Dr. Martinez for 5 minutes? She listened, then sighed. Yes, Please have him call Sarah Williams as soon as possible. It's about Mason Memorial. She ended the call and slumped against the counter. Voicemail. Again. Maybe he's sleeping? Joshua suggested. After working all night? Probably. She rubbed her eyes. The excitement from earlier had faded, replaced by familiar worry lines around her mouth. I just need to be sure. Marble limped over and pressed against her leg, offering comfort. His mom smiled despite her exhaustion, reaching down to pet the dog. At least one good thing came from all this, she said. Even if the job falls through, we got you, didn't we, girl? The collar jingled as Marble wagged her tail. The sound made their small kitchen feel more like a home, somehow. Joshua's mom picked up the contract again, reading through it for the 5th time. It all looks legitimate. The letterhead, the signatures, the terms. But why? Why would the chief of surgery himself come to our apartment on Christmas morning? Because of Marble, Joshua said simply. Because I helped her? Baby, I know you want to believe in Christmas miracles, but in real life, her phone rang, cutting her off. She grabbed it so quickly she almost dropped it. Hello? Dr. Martinez? Her whole body tensed. Yes, sir. Yes, I understand you're at home. I'm so sorry to disturb you, but... She walked into the living room, her voice dropping. Joshua stayed in the kitchen with Marble, straining to hear his mom's side of the conversation. He was here? In person? A pause. The youth program too? Another pause, longer this time. I see. And you vouch for him? For all of this? Joshua held his breath. Marble pressed closer, sensing his anxiety. No, I understand. Thank you for confirming. Yes, Merry Christmas to you too, sir. And I'm sorry again for disturbing your holiday. She came back to the kitchen, her face unreadable. Joshua waited, scratching Marble's good ear to keep his hands from shaking. Well, he finally asked when she didn't speak. It's real. She sat heavily in a kitchen chair. All of it. Dr. Martinez says Mr. Peterson's been watching me work for months, ever since I handled that bus accident in the ER. He's been waiting for an opening at Mason Memorial, but she looked at Joshua. He wanted to make sure I was the right fit for their culture. Something about values and character, like helping stray dogs on Christmas Eve, like raising a son who helps stray dogs on Christmas Eve. She reached for the contract again, but this time her hands were steady. Dr. Martinez says the youth program is legitimate too. They teach teenagers basic medical skills, let them volunteer in low-risk areas. It could be good for you if you're interested. Joshua looked down at Marble, remembering how natural it had felt to clean her wound and bandage her leg. I think I am. His mom's phone buzzed with a text. She read it, then showed it to Joshua. It was from Dr. Martinez. Sarah forgot to mention. Peterson's daughter was killed by a drunk driver 10 years ago today. She was a nurse who worked crazy hours trying to pay off student loans. She also rescued strays. Maybe explains his interest in your situation. He's a good man. Take the job. Oh, Joshua said softly. His mom was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone again and dialed a number from Mr. Peterson's business card. It rang twice before that deep, gentle voice answered. Mrs. Williams, the first was hoping to hear from you. Mr. Peterson, she said, putting the phone on speaker. I've spoken with Dr. Martinez. Excellent. And? She took a deep breath. The salary you're offering, it's very generous. It's what you're worth, he said firmly. What you've earned through years of dedication to your patients, often at the expense of time with your son. Joshua watched his mom's face soften. About the apartment listings, all pet-friendly buildings within walking distance of the hospital. The rent would be well within your means with the new salary. And before you ask, yes, the veterinary clinic services are included in your benefits package. Marble's tail thumped against the floor at the word veterinary. Joshua smiled, wondering if she somehow knew they were discussing her future. Mr. Peterson, his mom said carefully, Dr. Martinez mentioned about your daughter. The line went quiet for so long that Joshua thought they'd lost the connection. When Mr. Peterson spoke again, his voice was rougher. Catherine, he said. Her name was Catherine. She worked 3 jobs to pay off her nursing school debt. The night she died, she was exhausted from a double shift, but she stopped to help a dog that had been hit by a car. He cleared his throat. The drunk driver didn't even see her on the side of the road. I'm so sorry, Joshua's mom whispered. When I saw your son last night, sharing his dinner with that injured dog, he reminded me of her. That same instinct to help, regardless of personal cost. A pause. I couldn't save my daughter, Mrs. Williams, but I can help another caring soul avoid her fate. Joshua felt tears burning in his eyes. He buried his face in Marble's fur, feeling her solid warmth against his cheek. The position is yours if you want it, Mr. Peterson continued, his voice professional again. Regular hours, full benefits, opportunities for advancement. A chance to be home with your son in the evenings. Time to pursue your own dreams. Joshua's mom reached across the table and took his hand. What dreams would those be? Dr. Martinez mentions you've been taking online courses toward your nurse practitioner license. Mason Memorial has a tuition assistance program. You could finish your degree, specialize, maybe even teach someday. She squeezed Joshua's hand so tight it almost hurt. When would you need me to start? January 3rd. That gives you time to give notice at Boston General and move to a new apartment. We'll help with the relocation costs, of course. Of course, she echoed faintly. Mrs. Williams, Mr. Peterson said gently, I know this seems overwhelming, but sometimes life presents us with opportunities disguised as impossible choices. The question is, what does your heart tell you? She looked at Joshua, then at Marble, then at their small kitchen with its peeling linoleum and temperamental appliances. My heart, she said slowly, tells me that my son has been alone too much, that we've been surviving instead of living, that maybe it's time for a change. Then, she straightened in her chair, and Joshua recognized her, making an important decision face. We accept, she said firmly. All of it, the job, the program, everything, excellent. Mr. Peterson's smile was audible. I'll have the paperwork messengered over this afternoon. And Mrs. Williams? Merry Christmas to you and your family. All three of you, he added, making Joshua grin. After they hung up, his mom just sat there, staring at the phone. Mom? Joshua ventured. Are you okay? She looked up, and he was startled to see tears in her eyes. But she was smiling too. A real smile. The kind he hadn't seen since before his dad left. Come here, she said. Opening her arms, he went to her, and she pulled him into a tight hug. Marble limped over to join them, pressing against their legs. I'm more than okay, his mom whispered into his hair. I think we're all going to be more than okay. Outside, church bells rang again, celebrating Christmas morning. But inside their small kitchen, Joshua thought they were celebrating something else too. The end of one chapter of their lives, and the beginning of another. Hey, Mom, can we get a Christmas tree? A real one? For the new apartment? She laughed, wiping her eyes. Baby, we can get whatever kind of tree you want. But first, she looked at Marble's bandaged leg. I think someone needs to see a vet. What do you say, Dr. Joshua? Ready for your first real medical experience? Joshua straightened up, feeling important. Really? I can come. Of course. You're the one who found her, after all. You should be there every step of the way. Marble wagged her tail, making her new collar jingle like Christmas bells. Merry Christmas, Marble, Joshua whispered, hugging her gently. And this time, when the phone rang again, none of them jumped or worried. They knew that from now on, phone calls might bring good news instead of bill collectors. Life, Joshua was learning, was funny that way. Sometimes the best gifts came wrapped in unexpected packages, like a stray dog on a snowy night, or a stranger in an expensive suit on Christmas morning. The veterinary clinic at Mason Memorial looked more like a fancy hotel lobby than a hospital. Joshua sat in a plush chair, Marble leaning against his legs, while his mom filled out paperwork at the front desk. The Christmas tree in the corner sparkled with white lights, and soft holiday music played through hidden speakers. Regular patient or staff dependent? The receptionist asked. Staff dependent, his mom answered, and Joshua noticed how her shoulders straightened with pride. I'm starting at Mason Memorial in January. Sarah Williams, the receptionist's whole demeanor changed. Oh, Dr. Peterson called about you. Please come right this way. They were led to an exam room with warm yellow walls and a padded table. Marble balked at first, but Joshua coaxed her forward with gentle words and the treats the receptionist had given him. The vet will be in shortly, the receptionist said. Make yourselves comfortable. Once they were alone, Joshua's mom started pacing. She'd been doing that a lot since Mr. Peterson left, as if her body couldn't contain all her nervous energy. Maybe we should have waited, she said. Let her settle in more before bringing her to a strange place. Her leg needs checking, Joshua reminded her. You said so yourself. I know, but the door opened, and a young woman in scrubs entered. Hi there. I'm Dr. Chun. Who do we have here? This is Marble, Joshua said before his mom could speak. I found her last night. She was hurt and cold, so I helped her. Dr. Chun knelt down to Marble's level, letting the dog sniff her hand. You did the right thing. Want to tell me about her injury? Joshua described finding Marble, cleaning the wound, and bandaging it. Dr. Chun listened seriously, asking professional questions that made him feel like a real medical assistant. That's excellent wound care, she said when he finished. You might have a future in veterinary medicine. Joshua beamed. Really? Really? Now, let's take a look at that leg. The examination went smoothly. Marble stayed calm under Dr. Chin's gentle hands, only whimpering once when the bandage came off. Good news, Dr. Chin announced. The cut isn't deep, and you cleaned it well enough to prevent infection. We'll put in a few stitches just to be safe, give her vaccines and a microchip, and she'll be good to go. Stitches? Joshua's mom asked. Will that be covered under your staff benefits? Dr. Chin assured her. Dr. Peterson was very clear about that. While they waited for the stitches, Joshua's mom got another phone call. She stepped into the hallway to take it, leaving him with Marble and Dr. Chun. So, Dr. Chun said as she prepared the suture kit, thinking about becoming a vet? Joshua watched her movements carefully. Maybe, or a regular doctor, like Mr. Peterson. Either way, you've got good instincts. Not everyone would know how to help an injured animal. My mom's a nurse, Joshua explained proudly. She taught me first aid. She taught you well? Dr. Chun looked up from her work. You know, we have a youth volunteer program here too, not just at the main hospital. If you're interested in learning more about animal medicine, Joshua's eyes widened. Really? Could I? With your mom's permission, sure. We always need help socializing the shelter animals we treat. His mom came back in looking flustered. That was the landlord, she told Joshua. Someone reported seeing a dog in our apartment. Joshua's heart dropped. Are we in trouble? Actually, he was calling to say he's sorry he can't fix our heater until after the holiday. Didn't even mention the dog. Oh. Dr. Chin looked up from her suturing. You must be the new tenant for Oak Grove Apartments. My sister manages the building. Oak Grove? Joshua's mom asked. The pet-friendly complex near the hospital? Dr. Peterson usually recommends it to new staff. Great place. My sister's very picky about maintenance. Joshua watched his mom process this information. Another piece of their new life falling into place. There, Dr. Chin said, tying off the last stitch. All done. Joshua, want to see how we wrap this type of wound? He moved closer, absorbing every detail as Dr. Chin demonstrated proper bandaging technique. His mom watched too, and he could tell she was impressed by his focus. You're a natural, Dr. Chin told him. The volunteer program meets every Saturday morning. Think about it. Back in their car, Marble dozed in the back seat, worn out from her adventure. Joshua watched the snowy streets pass by, his mind full of possibilities. Mom, he ventured. About the volunteer program. Both programs, she corrected. Hospital and vet clinic. She glanced at him. You really want to do this? Yeah, I think I found what I want to be. She was quiet for a moment. You know, it's a lot of work, right? Years of school, lots of studying, like you with your nurse practitioner courses? She smiled. Exactly like that. They drove past Boston General, where she'd worked so many late nights. It looked different somehow, less intimidating, now that it was part of their past instead of their whole future. At home, Joshua helped Marble up the stairs while his mom checked the mail. The dog's new bandage was professional looking, bright white against her dark fur. You need a real bed, Joshua told her. And toys. And bills, and oh. His mom's voice made him turn. She was holding a thick envelope with the Mason Memorial logo. Already? Express Courier. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside were contracts, apartment listings, enrollment forms for her courses, and Joshua's breath caught. Registration papers for both youth programs. They really want us, she said softly. Of course they do. Joshua helped Marble settle on her blankets. You're the best nurse ever, and I'm going to be the best doctor. Right, Marble? The dog thumped her tail in agreement. His mom spread the papers across their coffee table. We should make lists, she said, switching into planning mode. What to pack, what to donate, what to buy for the new place. Christmas tree, Joshua reminded her. Yes, Christmas tree. And dog supplies. And dash, her phone rang again. Hello? Yes, this is Sarah Williams. She listened for a moment. Tomorrow morning? Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you. She hung up, grinning. That was Oak Grove Apartments. They had a cancellation. A 2-bedroom unit just opened up. We can see it tomorrow. With a yard for Marble? With a yard for Marble. Joshua looked around their small apartment. The peeling wallpaper, the cold radiator, the water stains on the ceiling. He thought he'd feel sad about leaving, but instead he felt ready. Joshua? His mom's voice was serious now. Are you sure about all this? It's a lot of change, very fast. He thought about Mr. Peterson's daughter, about choices and character and chances. He thought about how helping Marble had somehow helped them too. I'm sure, he said firmly. Marble got up from her blankets and limped over to press against his leg. Even with the stitches, she seemed stronger already. Well then, his mom said, picking up a pen, let's make those lists. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their new life. His mom wrote everything down in her neat nurse's handwriting. Apartment essentials, school transfer papers, program schedules, dog supplies. Joshua added his own items. Science books, a real stethoscope, volunteering clothes. As the winter sun set outside their window, casting long shadows across their plans, Joshua felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Excitement about the future. Hey, Mom? Thank you for saying yes to everything. She put down her pen and pulled him close. Thank you for showing me it was possible. Marble wedged herself between them, making them laugh. Her collar jingled, the sound of their new beginning. Tomorrow they would see their new apartment. Tomorrow they would start packing, start preparing, start becoming the people they were meant to be. But tonight, they were just a family. A boy, his mom, and the dog that had brought them a Christmas miracle. One more thing, his mom said, picking up her pen again. At the top of their longest list, she wrote in capital letters, Christmas tree. Outside, snow began to fall again. But this time, watching it through their window, Joshua didn't feel cold at all. The new apartment at Oak Grove was nothing like their old place. Joshua stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through clean windows, while the property manager pointed out features. No water stains, no peeling wallpaper, no broken heater. The previous tenant left suddenly, got a job in California, Ms. Chen explained. She looked a lot like her sister, the vet. Their loss is your gain. When can you move in? Joshua's mom gripped his shoulder. How soon could we? I can have the paperwork ready this afternoon. Keys by tomorrow. Marble limped around the space, sniffing corners. Her tail hadn't stopped wagging since they walked in. The yard is fenced, Ms. Chen added. Perfect for dogs. And there's a dog park 2 blocks away. The yard. Joshua went to the sliding glass doors and looked out. It wasn't huge, but there was grass and a small patio and enough space for Marble to run once her leg healed. We'll take it, his mom said. Ms. Chun beamed. Excellent. Dr. Peterson said you'd love this unit. Let me get the forms from my office. Once they were alone, Joshua's mom walked the space again, running her hand along the smooth walls. Can you believe this? No peeling paint, Joshua said. No drafts. No noise from the neighbors. No night shifts, she added softly. Marble came to sit between them, looking up expectantly. The morning sun caught her new collar, making it sparkle. We did it, girl, Joshua told her. We're home. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Signing papers, calling movers, making lists of things they'd need. By evening, they were back in their old apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes. The movers can come day after tomorrow, his mom said, hanging up her phone. That gives us tomorrow to finish packing and clean this place. Joshua looked around at the mess. Empty boxes everywhere. Piles of things to keep, donate, or throw away. His mom's nursing textbooks stacked by the door, ready for their new built-in bookshelf. "Need a break?" she asked, seeing his overwhelmed expression. He nodded. "Come on, let's walk Marble before it gets dark." The cold hit them as soon as they stepped outside. Marble didn't seem to mind, trotting between them on her new leash. Her stitches were holding well, and Dr. Chin had said she could put more weight on the leg now. They walked their usual route through the neighborhood, past the Martinez family's house with its Christmas lights, past the corner store where they bought groceries, past the bus stop where Joshua waited for school. "Going to miss it?" his mom asked. Joshua thought about it. Some things. Not the cold apartment. Or being alone so much. She squeezed his hand. "Me neither." Marble stopped to sniff a fire hydrant, then looked back at them as if to say, "Hurry up." "She's bossy," his mom laughed. "She knows what she wants. Like someone else I know." She ruffled his hair. "You really want to do both volunteer programs? It'll be a lot of work on top of school." "I want to learn everything," Joshua said, "about helping people and animals. Like you and Mr. Peterson." She was quiet for a moment. "Your father would be proud of you." Joshua's step faltered. They almost never talked about his dad. "He would?" he asked softly. "Very proud. And very wrong for leaving." Marble pressed against his leg, sensing his mood shift. He scratched her ears, grateful for her solid presence. "I'm proud of you too, Mom," he said, "for working so hard, for saying yes to the new job." She wiped her eyes quickly. "Come on, let's get back and order pizza. One last meal in the old place." They ate on the floor, since their table was already packed. Marble lay between them, accepting the occasional pepperoni. "Remember when we first moved here?" his mom asked. "You were so little. You said the empty apartment echoed like a cave. And you made us whisper all day so the echo monsters wouldn't find us." She smiled at the memory. "You were such an imaginative kid." "Still am." "Yes, you are. Always seeing possibilities." She looked at Marble, like seeing a scared, hurt dog and knowing she could be family. Joshua fed Marble another pepperoni. "She was always meant to be ours. We just didn't know it yet." His mom's phone buzzed, a text from Mr. Peterson checking on their move plans. As she replied, Joshua watched Marble exploring their half-packed living room. She sniffed boxes, wagged at familiar items, claimed a discarded blanket as her new bed. "Mr. Peterson wants to know if you're still interested in starting the hospital program next week," his mom said. "The vet clinic doesn't begin until February." "Both," Joshua said firmly. "I want to do both." "That's what I thought you'd say." She typed a reply. "He also says Marble's welcome to visit him in his office anytime. Apparently, he keeps dog treats in his desk." Joshua grinned. "He's not what we expected, is he?" "No," she agreed. "Sometimes the best people aren't." They worked a bit longer on packing, until exhaustion made them clumsy. Marble had claimed her blanket nest in the corner, watching their progress with half-closed eyes. "Enough for tonight," his mom decided. "Early start tomorrow." Joshua got ready for bed in their bathroom soon not to be theirs. As he brushed his teeth, he studied his reflection. Did he look different? He felt different. Back in his room, he found his mom sitting on his bed, holding his old stuffed bear, the one his dad gave him years ago. "Keep or donate?" she asked. Joshua sat beside her. The bear was worn, missing one eye, loved almost to pieces. "Keep," he said. "For memories." She nodded, adding it to the keep box. "Sometimes it's good to remember where we came from. Makes us appreciate where we're going." Marble limped in and settled on her blankets by Joshua's bed, her spot now, ever since that first night. "You know what I think?" his mom said, watching the dog. "I think she found us just as much as you found her." Yeah. We all needed saving that night, even if we didn't know it." She kissed his forehead and stood up. "Get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." But before she could leave, Joshua had to ask, "Mom, are you scared? About all the changes?" She paused in the doorway. "A little, but you know what? Good scared is better than safe sorry." "What does that mean?" "It means sometimes being brave enough to be scared leads to better things than being too afraid to try." She closed his door softly, leaving him to think about that. In the dark, Marble's breathing was steady and comforting. Outside, cars passed on the street, and somewhere a siren wailed. Familiar city sounds that soon they'd only hear in memories. Joshua reached down and touched Marble's head. "You did find us," he whispered. "And we found you. And now we're all going somewhere better." The dog sighed contentedly, and Joshua felt sleep tugging at him. Tomorrow they'd pack up their old life. Tomorrow they'd clean and sort and organize. But tonight, in this room where he'd spent so many nights alone, he wasn't alone anymore. And he never would be again. That thought followed him into his dreams, where moving boxes turned into treasure chests, and broken heaters became dragons to slay, and a brave dog led the way to adventures yet to come. In the morning, they'd face all the changes. But they'd face them together. A boy, his mom, and the Christmas miracle that wore a red collar and answered to the name Marble. The Oak Grove apartment felt like home faster than Joshua expected. Maybe it was the warmth from the working heater, or the way sunlight filled every room, or how Marble's nails clicked happily on the hardwood floors. Whatever it was, after just 2 weeks, he could barely remember their old place. "Joshua," his mom called from the kitchen. "You'll be late for your first day." He straightened his new volunteer shirt, crisp blue with Mason Memorial Youth Program embroidered on the pocket. Marble watched from her bed in the corner as he checked his reflection one last time. "Coming," he called back, grabbing his backpack. The kitchen smelled like actual breakfast, eggs and toast and coffee. His mom stood at the stove wearing regular clothes instead of scrubs, looking more rested than he'd seen her in years. "Nervous?" she asked, sliding a plate in front of him. "A little." He picked up his fork. "What if I mess up?" "Then you'll learn from it." She sat across from him with her own breakfast. A real sit-down morning meal, something that would have been impossible during her hospital night shifts. "That's what the program is for." Marble patted in and settled between them, hopeful for dropped scraps. Her leg had healed nicely. Dr. Chun had removed the stitches yesterday, praising Joshua's initial care again. "Mr. Peterson said there's another kid my age starting today, too," Joshua said around a mouthful of eggs. "Jack something." "Jackson Chun," his mom supplied. "Dr. Chin's nephew." She mentioned him at Marble's checkup. A horn honked outside, their ride to the hospital. Mr. Peterson had arranged for Joshua to carpool with Jack and his mom, who worked in hospital administration. "Got your ID badge? Notebook? Lunch money?" Joshua patted his pockets, nodding at each item. The ID badge was his pride and joy, with his photo and junior volunteer printed in bold letters. "Good luck, baby." His mom kissed his forehead. "I'm proud of you." Marble followed him to the door, tail wagging. "Be good girl," he told her. "Guard the house." Outside, a silver SUV waited in their driveway. A boy about Joshua's age sat in the back seat, wearing the same blue volunteer shirt. "You must be Joshua," Mrs. Chun said as he climbed in. "Jack's been excited to meet you." Jack grinned, showing braces. "Mom said you're the one who's doing both programs? Hospital and vet clinic?" "Yeah, starting next month for the vet part." "Cool. I wanted to do that too, but I'm allergic to cats." The boys chatted easily on the drive, discovering shared interests in science and medicine. By the time they reached the hospital, Joshua's nerves had settled. Mason Memorial was massive compared to Boston General, all glass and steel and modern architecture. But somehow it felt less intimidating than his mom's old workplace. "Youth volunteers this way," a security guard directed them, smiling. "Mr. Peterson's waiting in the conference room." They followed signs to a large room where about 10 other kids their age sat at tables, all wearing the same blue shirts. Mr. Peterson stood at the front, writing on a whiteboard. "Ah, Joshua, Jack, welcome." He gestured to empty seats. "We're just getting started." The morning flew by. They learned hospital protocols, basic hygiene procedures, and their assigned duties. Joshua took detailed notes, determined to remember everything. "You'll work in pairs," Mr. Peterson explained. "Mainly visiting patients who want company, helping in the children's ward, running approved errands for staff. Nothing medical yet. That comes after 6 months of training." Joshua's hand shot up. "What kind of medical training?" Mr. Peterson smiled. "First aid, vital signs, sterile procedures. The basics. Some of our junior volunteers go on to medical school, like my daughter did." His voice caught slightly on the last words. Joshua thought about Catherine, the daughter who'd stopped to help an injured dog. He sat up straighter, more determined than ever to learn everything he could. They broke for lunch, and Jack invited Joshua to sit with him in the cafeteria. The food was way better than school lunch: real vegetables, fresh fruit, even make your own sandwiches. "My aunt says you're good with animals," Jack said between bites. "The way you helped that dog on Christmas." "Marble?" "Yeah, she's part of our family now. Think you'll be a vet instead of a doctor?" Joshua considered this. "Maybe both?" "Mr. Peterson says there's a special program, One Health, where doctors treat people and animals. Study how diseases affect both." "That's cool." Jack's eyes lit up, like solving medical mysteries. After lunch, they had their first assignment, delivering books and magazines to patients. Joshua felt important with his volunteer badge, pushing the cart through bright hallways. Remember, their supervisor said some patients just want the reading material. Others might want to talk. Let them guide the interaction. Their first stop was an elderly man recovering from hip surgery. He brightened when they entered. Young visitors," he set aside his crossword puzzle. "Tell me, do either of you know a 7-letter word for new beginning? Genesis," Joshua said without thinking. The man beamed. "Perfect. Are you the dog rescuer? Peterson mentioned you'd be starting today. Word had gotten around, apparently." Joshua handed him a magazine, and they ended up talking about dogs for 10 minutes. The man had 3 retrievers at home. By the end of the day, Joshua's feet hurt from walking, but his mind buzzed with everything he'd learned. He met his mom in the staff lounge, where she was finishing orientation paperwork. "Good day," she asked. "The best. Can we get a book about One Health? And maybe some medical flashcards?" She laughed. "Let's stop at the bookstore on the way home." They found Mrs. Chun and Jack waiting at the car. "Hope you boys don't mind a detour," she said. Jack mentioned the bookstore. At home, Marble greeted them excitedly, showing off the new toy their neighbor had brought her, part of the growing collection from people who'd heard their story. "Look what we got." Joshua showed her his books: Introduction to One Health, Veterinary Basics, and a set of anatomy flashcards. Marble sniffed them politely. His mom stuck a magnet on the fridge, their volunteer schedule for the month. "You're sure about doing both programs? It's not too much." Joshua looked around their new kitchen, with its working appliances and warm lights. Through the window, he could see their small yard where Marble would play once the snow melted. On the counter, his mom's nursing textbook sat next to course catalogs for her practitioner program. "I'm sure," he said. "Like you said, good scared is better than safe sorry." She hugged him tight. "When did you get so grown up?" "Probably around the time I started rescuing dogs on Christmas Eve." Marble's tail thumped at the word Christmas. She brought them her new toy, a stuffed reindeer that squeaked. Later, doing homework at their actual dining table, not the coffee table like in the old apartment, Joshua paused to watch his mom reading on the couch, Marble dozing at her feet. The scene looked like something from a magazine. Warm, comfortable, right? His phone buzzed with a text from Jack. "Mom says we can study together tomorrow after our shift. Bring your flashcards." Joshua smiled, thinking how different this past month had been. New home, new school, new friend, new purpose. On his desk, the volunteer badge caught the evening light. Junior volunteer, it proclaimed. But Joshua knew it meant more than that. It meant possibility, promise, potential. Like Mr. Peterson had said that first morning, character reveals itself in moments of choice. Joshua had chosen to help a stray dog, not knowing that choice would open so many doors. Now he had more choices to make. Which medical terms to learn first, which patients to visit tomorrow, which future path to follow. But unlike the choices he'd faced in their old life, like whether to eat dinner or save food for later, these were good choices. Exciting choices. Marble got up and brought him a reindeer toy again. Time for their evening walk. Another new routine in their new life. "Coming, girl," he said, marking his place in the anatomy book. Outside, the winter air was crisp but not bitter. Their neighbors waved as they passed. The retired teacher who brought Marble treats, the kids who wanted to hear the Christmas Eve story again, the couple who'd helped them move in. Joshua breathed in the cold air, feeling the excitement of possibility in his chest. Tomorrow he'd learn more hospital procedures. Next month he'd start at the vet clinic. And somewhere down the road, maybe he'd be the one helping others find their new beginnings. But for now, He was content to walk with Marble in the gathering dark, both of them exactly where they were meant to be. 1 year later, Joshua stood in their Oak Grove living room, carefully hanging an ornament on their real Christmas tree. The lights reflected in the window, bright enough to rival their neighbors' displays. Marble lay on her special cushion nearby, watching the proceedings with contentment. A little to the left, his mom suggested, handing him another ornament. "We want to make sure Mr. Peterson can see it when he comes for dinner." The tree was nothing like their old plastic one. It filled the room with the scent of pine, and its branches held a year's worth of new memories. Joshua's first volunteer badge, a photo of Marble getting her stitches out, his mom's Mason Memorial ID, even a small replica of a stethoscope Jack had given him for his birthday. "What time is he coming?" Joshua adjusted the ornament. 6, right after his last surgery. She checked her watch, a Christmas gift from her nursing staff. "We have plenty of time." The doorbell rang, and Marble's tail started wagging before she even got up. She knew that ring. "Coming," Joshua called, hurrying to the door. He didn't need to check who it was. Marble only wagged like that for one visitor. Dr. Chin stood on their porch, holding a wrapped package. "Merry Christmas. Is my favorite patient ready?" Marble was already pressing against the door, excited for her monthly checkup. Even though her leg had healed perfectly, Dr. Chin still came by regularly, partly to check on her, but mostly, Joshua suspected, because she'd become family. "Come in," his mom called from the living room. "The tree's almost done." Dr. Chun handed Joshua the package. "A little something for your studies. But open it tomorrow." He added it to the growing pile under the tree, so different from last year's empty space. There were gifts from his volunteer teammates, from Jack's family, from the patients he'd helped throughout the year, and even one from Mrs. Martinez, their old neighbor who still sent cookies every month. "How's the new clinic coming along?" his mom asked Dr. Chun. "On schedule to open next month." And speaking of which, Dr. Chun turned to Joshua. "We'll need volunteers for the grand opening." "Interested?" "Really? But I'm still in training. You've shown more dedication than some of our adult volunteers. Plus, Marble would make an excellent therapy dog ambassador." Marble's tail wagged harder at her name. She'd become something of a celebrity at Mason Memorial, especially after Mr. Peterson started bringing her on rounds in the children's ward. The phone rang, the special tone Joshua had set for Jack. "Go ahead," his mom said. "We'll finish the tree." In his room, surrounded by medical textbooks and veterinary journals, Joshua answered the call. "Dude," Jack's excited voice burst through. "Did you see the email? We got accepted into the advanced program." Joshua's heart leaped. They'd applied for Mason Memorial's High School Medical Intensive, a summer program usually reserved for older students. "When did they send it?" "Like 5 minutes ago. Mr. Peterson pushed for us to get in early. Said something about character and dedication." Through the phone, Joshua heard Mrs. Chun calling Jack to dinner. "See you tomorrow?" "Mr. Peterson's coming over." "Yeah, Mom said we'd stop by after dinner. She's bringing that pie you like." After hanging up, Joshua sat on his bed, looking around his room. Medical posters covered the walls. Human anatomy on one side, animal anatomy on the other. His desk held both hospital and veterinary clinic schedules, color-coded and organized. Next to them sat his latest project, research on therapy dog programs. The doorbell rang again. This time, Marble barked once, her special greeting from Mr. Peterson. Joshua hurried out to find the chief of surgery, standing in their entryway, snow dusting his expensive coat. He held a large box wrapped in silver paper. "Merry Christmas, Joshua." He set the box down carefully. "This one's a bit special." Marble pressed against Mr. Peterson's legs, and he reached down to scratch her ears. The gesture reminded Joshua of that first night, when he'd reached out to a scared, hurt dog. "Sarah," Mr. Peterson greeted his mom. "The tree looks wonderful." Come in," she urged. "Dinner's almost ready." Their kitchen smelled amazing. Ham and potatoes and fresh bread. Nothing like last year's microwave meal. As they settled around the table, a proper dining table now, with matching chairs, Joshua felt a familiar warmth in his chest. Mr. Peterson said grace, then raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, "and to the choices that lead us to them." "To Marble," Joshua added, "for finding us The dog, hearing her name, left her cushion to sit between Joshua and Mr. Peterson, her favorite people. Speaking of choices, Mr. Peterson said as they ate, Dr. Martinez mentioned you've been spending extra time in pediatrics. Joshua nodded. I like working with the kids, especially when we bring Marble. Thinking about specializing? Maybe pediatric surgery, or veterinary surgery, or both, like that one health program you told me about. Mr. Peterson smiled. You know, Catherine, my daughter, she wanted to do something similar. Bridge the gap between human and animal medicine. He didn't get sad talking about her anymore. Instead, he told stories about her kindness, her dedication, her love for helping others. Joshua thought she would have liked Marble. Oh, his mom exclaimed suddenly. The surprise. Should we? Mr. Peterson checked his watch. Perfect timing. They led Joshua to the living room, where Mr. Peterson retrieved an envelope from his coat pocket. Your mother and I have been discussing your future, he said. Your dedication to both programs, your academic improvements, your way with patients, both human and animal. Joshua opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a letter on Mason Memorial letterhead. A scholarship, he whispered, reading, for college and medical school, his mom said softly. Or veterinary school. Or both, if you maintain your grades. But that's years away. Character reveals itself in moments of choice, Mr. Peterson quoted. You made a choice last Christmas that showed exactly who you are. This is just helping you become who you're meant to be. Joshua couldn't speak. Marble pressed against his legs, offering support like she had that first night. There's more, his mom said. Showing the other thing, Mr. Peterson pulled out another envelope. The therapy dog program approved Marble's application. Once she completes training, she'll be official. Marble's tail thumped against the floor. Somehow Joshua thought she knew. The doorbell rang again. The Chins arriving with pie and more presents. Soon the apartment was full of people and laughter and the sound of Marble's tags jingling as she greeted everyone. Joshua found a quiet moment to slip onto their small patio. The snow was falling softly just like last Christmas Eve, but everything else was different. Through the sliding glass door, he could see his mom laughing with Dr. Chun, Mr. Peterson showing Jack something on his phone, Marble moving from person to person collecting pets and treats. The tree lights made everything glow warm and bright. 1 year ago, he'd been alone in a cold apartment, sharing his dinner with a stray dog. One simple choice to help someone in need had changed everything. The patio door slid open. You okay? His mom asked. Yeah, just thinking. She wrapped an arm around him. About last Christmas? About how different everything is. Marble squeezed out to join them, pressing between them like she belonged there. Because she did belong there, Joshua realized. They all did. Different better? His mom asked. Joshua looked at their full apartment, at his mom's rested face, at Marble's shiny coat and bright eyes. He thought about his volunteer badge, his new friends, his future plans. He thought about scared dogs and Christmas miracles and choices that change lives. Different perfect, he said. Inside, someone called them for dessert. They went back in together, mother, son, and dog, leaving their old life behind in the falling snow. Mr. Peterson was cutting the pie, telling a story about his latest surgery. Jack was showing Dr. Chun his anatomy flashcards. Mrs. Chun was admiring the tree ornaments. And in that moment, Joshua understood what his mom had meant about good scared being better than safe sorry. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest choices. Sometimes helping others means helping yourself. And sometimes, on a cold Christmas Eve, a stray dog can lead you home. Merry Christmas, Marble, Joshua whispered. She looked up at him with those same soulful eyes that had peered through his window 1 year ago. Her tail wagged once, speaking volumes. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a new beginning.